Hi guys, this is Shivadi. Welcome to the Spring Framework interview question and answers. In this session, I am going to explain frequently asked interview questions in Spring Framework of core module. Let's go ahead and start. The first question is, what is Spring Framework, features and its advantages? So Spring Framework is a powerful lightweight application development framework used for enterprise Java application. So it is an open source framework for Java to develop the enterprise applications. So this is a modularized framework because Spring Framework itself, it has a modularized basis. It has the core module, it has the web module, it has the data access module, it has the OOP module. So based on our requirement, the core module is the mandatory to start with the Spring Framework, and then apart from that, based on your requirement, you can choose the particular module and you can develop your application. And then it is a lightweight because it will allow you developer to select the specific module what he want to based on the which module he want to work on, and he can start developing the application. And it user can develop end-to-end application using the Spring framework because it supports the UI layer support is there, and service layer and the business layer support is there, and data access layer support is also there, and container support itself it is there. So by using the Spring framework, we can develop the end-to-end applications from the smaller application to the till enterprise level applications. And one of the strongest feature of the Spring framework is inversion of control. Inversion of control is a paradigm which is going to allow you can we can develop an application loosely coupled with each other. That means you can develop an programming code such a way that by using the POJS you can develop, and the configuration will be done in another file called as a application context file. At the runtime, Spring Container will create the object and it will inject those objects, so that we are going to decouple the code, and which will result in easy for the maintenance and also easy for testing. And accept oriented programming is another feature. So AOP feature of the Spring framework to develop application in which business logic is going to be separated from the system services, like a logging framework or transaction management, that we can separate from the actual business logic. And by default, Spring framework comes with the containers which will be managed the complete life cycle of the bins which it is created by using the application context.xml. So there is no need of actually explicitly no need of taking care of the web application server or the application server support. And by using the MVC framework, you can develop the MVC based web applications. And Spring Frameworks provides a generic transaction management layer which can be used with or without using the J2EE environment. And it has the support for the JDBC framework. That means by using the Spring JDBC framework, it is going to provide the abstract layer. You no need to actually really write the boiler code like getting the connection and creating a statement, all these things, because by internally Spring framework itself, it will be taking care of all those aspects, and then it is going to provide the very high level to interact with the databases. And you can integrate with the any existing Java frameworks like a Struts, JSF, and even it has a support for the Hibernate. And existing it is support for the most of the existing technology with very easily with minimum effort you can integrate, as it comes by default with the testing framework. As and also we are by because of the inversion of control, our Spring application can be easily tested. So those are the features and advantages of the Spring Framework. Let us go ahead and start with the Spring Framework module. As Spring, we know that it has a huge framework, but it comes with the concept of a modularized framework. Let us see what are the Spring modules. So Spring contains the test framework support. That means by using this framework with the help of the unit JUnit and the TestNG, our Spring component can be easily tested, and also you can test the all the Spring components very easily. And then we have the core container. In the core container we have the beans module and core module. So these are the very important components of the Spring framework, because beans and core act as the classes which are available in the beans or core, which are act as a Spring container. So Spring container is a um, uh, s- one of the important component in order to which will maintains the complete life cycle of a beans. So in the beans we have the bean factory, which is act as a container, and core we have the application context, which is act as a container for the Spring applications. And by using the context, you can go with the internalization, and by using the expression languages, we can expression language for querying and manipulating the object graph at runtime. So it can be seen as a extension of the unified expression language. By using that, basically what has is the language support setting and getting of the properties values and property assignment and method invocation, and accessing the context of array and collections and indexers, logical and arithmetical operators, named variables, and retrieval objects by name from the Spring container. So all these features it is going to support as part of the expression language. And as we discussed about the AOP, AOP is basically a module which is going to help you to develop an application in which service layer and the actual service, that means basically which is going to separate the business logic, which is going to be separated from the our system services, such as logging the framework or transaction management. Okay, so that is how the AOP framework is going to be used. And then data access or the integration. In the case of data access, we have the JDBC. So JDBC provide an JDBC abstraction layer that removes the need to do tedious JDBC coding, such as creating a connections, creating a statement, and then getting the result set and iterating all this stuff internally. It will taking care, and which is going to provide a few APIs which can be used to interact with the database. And it has a support for the object relational mapping framework, such as a Hibernate, IBATIS, and also it has support for the JPA and JDO. All these inbuilt support as part of the Spring framework by using the ORM module. And then if you are talking about the object XML as a mapping, so it has the default support for the operations whatever we are performing on the parsing and reading from the XMLs, all this taken care in the OXM module. And if you are working with the any Java messaging service applications, then Spring Framework has the module for that, that is a Java messaging services. And by using this feature, we can produce and consume the messages. And it has the strong support for the transaction management, which provides a programmatic as well as a declarative transaction management. So by using that, either you can go with the declarative or the programmatic transaction management. And if you come with the web module basically consists of the web servlet and web portlet modules. So web module is basically you can develop an web oriented applications, such as a multi-part uploading files, and initializing the container using the servlet listeners, and web oriented application context. So basically web is going to help you to develop the solid based kind of applications, or even for the restful web services kind of applications we can develop. And also it has the web servlet module provide the Spring model view controller architecture of the web application we can develop. And web portlet module provides the MVC implementation to be used in portlet environment and mirrors, which is provided in the web servlet module. So these are the modules are available in the Spring framework. And now what we can do is, the core container is the main component for developing the Spring application. After that, you can choose any specific module where you want to develop your application, and then you can start developing it. No need of knowing complete knowledge of all these modules, and this is called as a lightweight and modularized framework. Okay, so the next question is on what is meant by dependency lookup. So dependency lookup is an approach where we can get the resource after the demand. That means if you see here, there is a employee class inside we have the address object. That means address object is depend on the employee class. Now, what we are doing here is in the employee constructor, basically, let us consider we don't pass this one, then we are going to define the employee object, creating an object for the employee inside the employee constructor. Sorry, basically we are creating an address object inside the employee. That means here there is a tightly coupled each other with the employee class versus address. For example, if there is any change happen to the address of the employee object, then these two modules are going to be requires the changes. Hence, it is a bad practice with respect to the maintenance perspective. Hence, by using the dependency lookup, what happens is it has the tight coupling and also not easy for test, and there is a problem when we are in the point of maintenance. Okay, so in order to eliminate this problem, the comes with the concept of the dependency injection and inversion of control. Now let us see what is meant by dependency injection and inversion of control. Inversion of control means object do not create other object on which they rely to do their work. Instead, they get the object that they need from an outside resource, for example, an XML configuration file. And if you see the dependency injection means that this is done without the object intervention, usually by a framework component that passes the constructor parameters and the set properties. So what exactly the dependency injection and the inversion of control is? Whenever there is a tight coupling with each other, that means there is a tight coupling between the objects, what dependency injection or the inversion of control says is you would no need to create the object with tightly coupled each other. Instead of that, you make the code your configurable such a way that some other party or the other container will inject those objects at the runtime so that your code become loosely coupled each other. That means if the above code, if we see here, we are going to decouple the code in such a way that if you see here employee, and here we are we are not creating any employee or the address object, but what happens is, let us consider in the case of Spring, we are going to define these two beans in the configuration file called as a application context.xml file. There we are going to define configure how these objects needs to be created, and then we are going to inject though, and once we configure it, then at the runtime the container will read that XML file and it will inject those objects properly. Hence, now there is a decouple between the how the objects are created versus how it is actually created earlier. That is the reason by using this loose coupling, it has the better maintenance and also we can easily test. So as we know that application context.xml will have the bean configurations, how the bean has to create and how it has to inject. We can, in the next session, we can see how we can inject the object. But at this point of time, we can come to know the conclusion that by using the inversion of controller, we can remove the dependency from the programmatic code so that we can easily test it. And the next question is, how many ways you can create a Spring application metadata? Spring application metadata is nothing but the configuration file from where the container will read the data and it is going to initialize the object. So there are three ways you can provide this configuration Spring application metadata. One is XML based metadata and annotations based configuration. If you are, this is going to support from the Spring 2.5 onwards, and then Java based configuration using at the rate of bean annotation, which is going to support from the Spring 2.3 Spring 3.0 onwards. So you can combinedly you can use along with the XML, along with you can use annotations as well as the Java based. that is the up to the developer to get the choice. Either you can go with the combination of one or two or three, or you can independently you can work on only if you want to go with the Java based, no need of XML, then you can go with the Java based. At the same similarly annotations or similarly for the XML based metadata. Okay, so the next question is going to be what is the difference between the bean factory versus application context. So if you see the Spring modules, we have the core module, and the in the core module we have the beans and the context. So if you see the bean is the bean factory is the one of the container which will be responsible for instantiating the beans and automatically doing the wiring. But the main difference for the bean factory versus the application context is bean factory supports the lazy loading. That means whenever you call the get bean, then only the container will start processing your configuration file and it will create the beans and then it will inject. But whereas in the case of application context, it is going to instantiation and wiring, and it has the additional capabilities like automatic bean post processor registration and automatic bean factory post process registration and convenient message source access and application event publication. So by using the bean factory, you cannot do the bean post processor or the bean factory post processor registration, and also it will not support for the publication notifications. That means basically notifications, and does not support for the message source access. So ideally, if you are going to use the application context, then automatically you have the superset of functionality of the bean factory. So in order to basically, in order to difference between the bean factory versus application context, bean factory is a lower functionality when compared to the application. It supports the lazy loading, but application context is actually a eager loading. Okay, so that is the basic difference. And based on your choice, if you have only requirement where you have to only create the beans, then go with the bean factory. But if you want to get the additional features of this bean post processor and bean factory post processor, then you go with the application context. And then we have seen what is meant by dependency injection. Now we will see what are the different type of the dependency injection, and then we will see which one is better. See, the first one is dependency injections are two types. One is setter based dependency injection, where the container will create a object and then it will inject the object through the setter method. That is nothing but the property. If you see here in the configuration file application context.xml, you can provide the definition for the address. You are creating an object for the address, and also you are going to create for object for the employee. But this address object we are injecting the for the property. So this is nothing but the setter based dependency injection. And another one is the constructor based dependency injection. In the constructor based dependency injection, we are going to inject the object to the through the constructor. Here we have created the address object in the configuration file, and then whenever we are creating an employee object, we are injecting the address through ref property to the address. This is called as a constructor based dependency injection. Now you have a question which one we need to use. So for example, in a whenever you go with the setter based injection, it is a partially. For example, if you want to do a dependency injection partially, then go with the setter based dependency injection. That means out of three properties, if you want to go with if you want to set only two, then property based that means setter based dependency injection is the better choice. If you go for the constructor based dependency injection, then what happens is it is mandatorily you have to pass the all the dependencies, otherwise it will not allow you to create the otherwise it will not allow container will throw an exception, because constructors, whenever you say constructor based, all the dependency object you have to mandatorily pass. And second one is whenever you use the setter and the constructor based dependency injection, then setter based dependency injection overrides the constructor based dependency injection, because first it is going to create a object that is nothing but the constructor will be invoked. After that, again, if you apply the setter based dependency injection, then setter based dependency injection overrides the constructor based. So that is the choice of you, based on your situation. You can select whether the setter based or the constructor based. I am going to explain the next set of questions in the next session. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.